today's conversation is still only a start. There's much more work to be done to end the alienation of LGBT Jamaicans. Too many families, neighbors, landlords, and others have forced our brothers, sisters, friends, and loved ones from their homes and communities. Sadly, most Jamaicans are socialized to believe that this is acceptable, and it is regrettable that LGBT people can be evicted from their communities on a moment's notice and possibly have to flee the island. Today's symposium also marks JFLAG's observation of the International Day Against Homophobia, or Idaho for short.
Each year, many are evicted from their communities, and a few feel compelled to flee Jamaica to seek refugee status abroad. The JFLAG team, including staff and the board of directors, are very delighted to observe this historic day with the launch of the inaugural Larry Chang Human Rights Symposium. In December, we will celebrate our 15th anniversary, working to promote the constitutional rights of LGBT Jamaicans. And it gives me great pleasure that this forum is being used to recognize the phenomenal work of one of our founders, Larry Chang.
I worked once with a vulnerable group, and the mantra of that group was nothing about us without us. And I'm wondering whether today we have any of the people that we're speaking about. We do not know those stories. We are all going home to a bed and a meal, and we probably had a meal before.
We believe that the issue of homelessness and forced migration is a terrible consequences of the discrimination that is blatant in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean towards LGBT people. And we have also experienced this directly because in the Amnesty International office we receive several requests of advice for Jamaican people who are seeking asylum in the UK. So it's really something which we are really aware of, and we are determined to stand again besides JFLAG and the whole LGBT community to fight against this plight and the whole general problem of discrimination.
Last year, we closed 120 asylum cases that include every part of the world, right? In the last 4 years alone, we've represented 139 Jamaicans. So it's a huge amount of the work that we do. It's 40% each year. And they weren't necessarily all granted asylum. There are a lot of, asylum is a discretionary thing. The government of the United States has to like you to give it to you. But you know, the good news is if you're an LGBT person and you're from Jamaica, you're probably already halfway there.
At every turn, we are told we are abnormal, immoral, abominable. We sometimes get the sense that we cannot fully be Jamaican and LGBT at the same time, unless one is muted, usually the LGBT part. I'm sure many LGBT people here and in Jamaica in general can recite just enough stories of LGBT people being chased, beaten, maimed, and murdered to remind ourselves why it is that we divorce our sexual and gender identities from our public personas. Most of us are never fully comfortable with being LGBT, except when hidden from the public's ever-watchful gaze.
This is the beginning of the journey, because until you arrive at that place, that center within yourself, nothing else will happen. No good will flow, no development will occur, no expansion. It must start with that seed that you find within yourself, which you then nurture. It'll grow, it'll germinate, it'll grow, and it will bear fruit.
While most of us would never publicly affirm who we are, there is a group of homeless people in our community who are shameless. And I mean that in a good way. They congregate nightly in New Kingston to keep each other's company and to protect each other. Many come from poor urban communities and have been displaced because of their sexual orientation. Others could return home but are unwilling to give up the community they've created in exchange for an unfulfilling life with their family, where they will be forced to repress who they are. This community is perhaps the only identifiable group of LGBT people anywhere in Jamaica. And when I first came here to do research in 2011, I was blown away by their presence.
In the Street Youth Survey, there was no attempt to define whether or not you're gay or lesbian or transgender. When asked about why they left their original home, 6.1% said parents sent me away. 7.4% said other reasons. 29.4% said came to earn an income. 17.8% spoke to poverty and hunger. 9.8% spoke to abuse in the home. 9.2% spoke to the abuse of stepmother and stepfather, and 8.6% spoke of their mother and father being abusive and actually sent them out of the home.
My concern is what came about this time around is that the child trafficking, the sexual slavery, and far more data on that, which is really it is spelling a lot of a major concern in terms of the future of our young people, or even the present of our young people, and how much in a lot of ways I don't know if you want to say we, but in a sense there has been a failure then to deal with where young people are at, so that they're better equipped to handle taking over the country when that time comes, because it has to come.
We each have rights which are inviolable, and that as human beings we also are accountable to ourselves and to hold others accountable to ensure that these rights are respected, and that every one of us deserves to be treated equally.
One of the reasons for which LGBT people of the lowest social strata are despised is the belief that they are often vulgar and foolhardy. These qualities are best demonstrated by their proclivity for tracing, which, as we know, is ghetto behavior. Those of us who think that appealing to Jamaican notions of respectability will reduce the likelihood of an attack are adamant that these rowdy gays, as the newspaper dubs them, are a disgrace to the community. They make us look bad. They make everyone think we are all like that. However, the ability to trace, if you haven't noticed, and to stare down a potential attacker is a requirement for those whose gender identities, whose exposure to scrutiny, whose legions of gender non-conforming friends, among other markers of LGBT identity, make them easy targets in the patrol the jurisdiction of the overzealous gender and sexuality police.
I'm wondering, what are the challenges that your organization has faced in trying to work with organizations to make Jamaica a more inclusive place for all people, based on the fact that you are an LGBT serving organization, and that may cause tensions with other organizations that don't specifically work on LGBT issues?
I think we've been able to come a long way just by being more inclusive. I mean, even us speaking out on other issues to become more inclusive. And so we've found ways to make the coalitions work. We still have some challenges in various respects. I mean, there's a bullying piece that we've been working on forever, and just for the Ministry of Education to sit on a committee that names JFLAG as a member was an issue in advancing the discourse. So we still have some issues at various levels.
We aren't that far from where you are in a lot of respects, but the level of danger is a lot different.
In the print media, it's never 30 homeless people in New Kingston who are perpetrators of crime in the area, who disrupt business in the area. It's gays, vicious gays, gay scum, dirty battyman. This is centralizing discourse that renders all LGBT people eyesores and criminals is not accidental. It is part of an orchestrated attempt to demonize non-heterosexual people and to affirm the so-called natural order. Angst about the behavior and the actions of these individuals in New Kingston provide cover for what is an insidious and persistent attempt to smear LGBT people. It is wrong, and too many of us are complicit in sustaining this dehumanizing discourse.
But here in Jamaica, the media seems to have a mandate to further marginalize this group. Taking it a step further, I would argue that they demonize this group. The media and a free and fair press are a key component of maintaining a strong democracy. It has a responsibility to use this power in a respectful manner, especially when covering vulnerable societies. This type of coverage also undermines the credibility of Jamaica's journalists and media outlets, which ultimately weakens this important component of a democratic society. As we know, there are many social ills plaguing Jamaica, and this issue is one of them. Violence, prejudice, and discrimination poison the country's health, which in turn affects its productivity, its reputation, and its ability to compete on the international stage. In short, how we treat others affects the conditions in which we live.
I'm profoundly concerned about the way they live as human beings. Now, how do we have this conversation as a community? Is it okay for a group of heterosexual teenagers and young adults to have to arm themselves for whatever reason, to have to act way out for whatever reason, to have to be disruptive for whatever reason? Is it okay? And if it's not okay, then how do we have a conversation about loving you back into your humanity in a way that it can get expressed?
What bothers me really is that when people step to the table and say they're interested in helping these individuals and in solving their issue, the discourse, the language they choose betrays certain prejudices, certain misunderstandings about these individuals and who they are. And because of those prejudices, I often get the sense that they're not actually genuinely interested in solving the problem of homelessness that these people are in, but in really making these people invisible. Because you cannot ignore the fact that they are the most visible group of LGBT Jamaicans ever, right? That is significant politically in and of itself. And so the way we respond to them really is going to think about, how we're framing the issue, how we view them as individuals. And the fact is, Carol, many of us don't see them as human beings.
We as an LGBT community cannot wait for legislation or the government to give us any kind of handout or handout. We have to go within ourselves, tap our own inner resources, and come up with our own solutions and drag the rest of the country along with us. Yeah? We are pioneers, we buck the system, we ask questions, and we lead the way. We always have, whether in the fields of fashion, music, creativity, boldness, daringness, you name it.
I believe in our cause. I believe in the power of the love and understanding we have for each other. I believe in the humanity of my Jamaican family, and I take seriously my obligation to help educate others about who we are. We are citizens of the biggest little country in the world. Even in the face of aggressive opposition, we must continue to proclaim, I am Jamaican. We are Jamaicans.
I think this was a very productive session. Agreed that this is just the beginning of the conversation. And Yvonne, we'll be having more of these, not necessarily in this kind of space, but more conversations about the realities of particularly the most vulnerable amongst our LGBT community.